Commander Thexalar stood on the bridge of the Imperial Dreadnought Eternal Dominion, his 4 arms crossed behind his back in the traditional posture of authority. Through the massive viewport, the swirling colors of hyperspace created patterns that would drive lesser species mad. The Krillian Empire had conquered 73 star systems over the past 2 centuries, and Thexalar had personally overseen the subjugation of 12 of them. "Commander, we are receiving another transmission from the frontier station," his communications officer announced, her voice carrying the slight tremor that always appeared when delivering unwelcome news. Thexalar's mandibles clicked together in annoyance. This was the 4th message from Station Outpost 447 in as many days. The station sat on the very edge of claimed Krillian space, monitoring a worthless sector that contained nothing but a few scattered colonies and one unremarkable yellow star with a collection of primitive worlds orbiting it. "Play it," he commanded, not bothering to hide his irritation. The holographic display flickered to life, showing Station Commander Vexnor. The junior officer looked haggard, his usually pristine uniform disheveled. His scales had lost their healthy sheen, replaced by the dull gray that indicated extreme stress. "Commander Thexalar, I must insist that you relay my concerns to High Command immediately. The situation in Sector 447 has deteriorated beyond our ability to manage. 3 of our patrol ships have gone missing in the past month. The locals, the ones who call themselves humans, they are not what our initial surveys suggested. They possess technology that should not exist at their level of development. More concerning, they possess a tactical creativity that defies our strategic models." Thexalar felt his secondary stomach churn. Vexnor was a decorated officer, not prone to panic or exaggeration. Yet his words sounded like the ravings of a soldier who had spent too long in isolation. "Yesterday, one of our corvettes, the Swift Retribution, encountered what appeared to be a simple mining vessel near the asteroid belt of their home system. Captain Drexcon followed standard protocol and demanded their immediate surrender. The mining ship responded by deploying what we initially believed were cargo containers. Those containers were actually camouflaged weapon platforms. The Swift Retribution was destroyed in 47 seconds, Commander." 47 seconds! The hologram of Vexnor leaned closer to the recorder, his eyes wide with something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "That is not the worst of it, sir. We managed to recover the black box from another missing patrol ship, the Crimson Fang. The last transmission showed them pursuing a human supply convoy. The convoy split into 3 groups, each taking a different trajectory through an asteroid field. When our ship followed the largest group, the asteroids themselves came alive. The humans had hollowed out dozens of them, filling them with railguns and missile batteries. They turned that asteroid field into a death trap. Our ship never had a chance." Thexalar watched as Vexnor took a deep breath, visibly steadying himself. "These humans, Commander, they do not fight like any species we have encountered. They do not stand and face us in honorable combat. They hide, they deceive, they turn their environment into a weapon. Their ships are slower than ours, their armor weaker, their weapons less powerful on paper. Yet they are winning, sir. They are winning because they refuse to fight the way we expect them to fight." The hologram flickered, and Vexnor's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I have sent 3 formal requests for reinforcements. I have sent detailed tactical analyses. I have sent casualty reports and strategic assessments. High Command has dismissed every single one. They believe I am overreacting to a minor frontier nuisance. But I am telling you now, Commander, as one officer to another, if the Empire continues to underestimate these humans, we will pay a price that our civilization may not survive." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Thexalar staring at the empty space where the hologram had been. He stood in silence for a long moment, his mind processing what he had just witnessed. Station commanders did not make such bold statements lightly. Accusing High Command of incompetence, even indirectly, was a career-ending move. For Vexnor to take such a risk meant he believed the threat was genuine. "Sir?" his communications officer asked hesitantly. "Should I forward this to High Command?" Thexelar considered his options. He could relay the message and add his own recommendation that Vexnor's concerns be taken seriously, but that would likely result in both of them being labeled as alarmists. The Empire had grown comfortable in its dominance. The very suggestion that a species from a single yellow star system could pose a meaningful threat would be seen as absurd. Alternatively, he could travel to Sector 447 himself and assess the situation firsthand. The Eternal Dominion was more than capable of handling any primitive species that thought they could challenge Krillian supremacy. If Vexnor was wrong, Thexelar would return with evidence of the station commander's incompetence. If he was right, well, Thexelar would become the officer who identified and neutralized a genuine threat to the Empire. "Set course for Sector 447, Thexelar commanded. "Maximum speed. And send a message to Vexnor. Tell him reinforcements are en route." His tactical officer, a veteran of 30 campaigns, turned from his station with an expression of surprise. "Sir, our current orders are to patrol the Xerxian border. Diverting to Sector 447 without authorization from High Command could be interpreted as an officer exercising his command discretion to investigate a potential threat to Imperial security," Thexelar interrupted smoothly. "I will take full responsibility for the decision. If High Command objects, they can file their complaints after we have resolved whatever situation exists at that frontier station." The bridge crew exchanged glances but quickly returned to their duties. Whatever reservations they had, they knew better than to question their commander's orders a second time. The Eternal Dominion was a marvel of Krillian engineering. Nearly 3 kilometers long, bristling with enough firepower to reduce a planet's surface to molten slag, protected by energy shields that could withstand sustained assault from an entire fleet. The ship carried a complement of 2,000 soldiers, 400 crew members, and enough supplies to operate independently for 2 years. In the entire history of its service, no enemy vessel had ever managed to penetrate its shields, let alone damage its hull. Thexelar walked to his private quarters, located just off the main bridge. The room was sparse by the standards of other species, containing only a meditation platform, a tactical display, and a small shrine to the war ancestors. He activated the display and pulled up every piece of available information on the species known as humans. The initial survey data, collected nearly 20 years ago by an automated probe, painted an unremarkable picture. The humans were bipedal mammals from a planet they called Earth. Their world orbited a G-type main sequence star in what they referred to as the Sol system. They had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel using a crude warp drive technology that was centuries behind Krillian standards. But as Thexelar dug deeper into the files, he began to find details that troubled him. The humans had evolved on what the galactic community classified as a Class 9 death world. The gravity was slightly higher than standard, the weather patterns were violently unpredictable, and the planet was home to countless species of predators and toxic organisms. More intriguing was the humans' history. They had spent thousands of years engaged in almost continuous warfare with each other. The database contained references to conflicts with staggering casualty figures. Something called World War II had resulted in over 70 million deaths. The humans had even developed weapons capable of destroying their entire civilization, had brought themselves to the brink of extinction, yet somehow had pulled back and survived. Thexelar read about human military tactics. They had concepts like guerrilla warfare and asymmetric combat. They wrote entire treatises on deception and misdirection. One human military philosopher, a being named Sun Tzu, had written something called The Art of War over 2,000 years ago, and humans still studied it as a foundational text. He found himself reading a passage that had been translated into Krillian. All warfare is based on deception. Hence, when we are able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. The words seemed to echo Vexnor's descriptions of the humans' tactics. They did not fight with honor. They fought to win, using whatever methods achieved victory at the lowest cost to themselves. A chime at his door interrupted his reading. "Enter," Thexlar called. His executive officer, Sub-Commander Lix Ara, stepped inside. She was young for her rank, having earned her position through a combination of tactical brilliance and absolute fearlessness in combat. Her scales bore the silver sheen that marked her as a member of the warrior caste, and her eyes held the sharp intelligence that made her invaluable as a second-in-command. "Commander, I have reviewed the transmissions from Station Outpost 447, she said without preamble. "If you will permit me to speak candidly, I believe Station Commander Vexnor is correct in his assessment. These humans represent a more significant threat than High Command realizes." Thexlar gestured for her to continue. "I pulled the service records of every officer who has had contact with human forces. The pattern is consistent. Initial encounters result in Krillian victories. Our technology is superior. Our tactics are proven through centuries of warfare. Our forces are better trained and equipped. But subsequent engagements show a rapid adaptation by the humans. They learn from every defeat. They analyze our tactics, identify our patterns, and develop countermeasures at a speed that should not be possible." Lixara activated her personal datapad, projecting a series of tactical maps into the air between them. "Look at this engagement from 6 weeks ago. A Krillian strike force of 8 ships attacked a human mining colony. Standard raid protocol. The humans had minimal defenses, just 2 orbital platforms and a handful of patrol craft. We destroyed the platforms easily and were preparing to bombard the colony when the humans deployed something unexpected. They had constructed a network of ground-based mass drivers hidden beneath the surface. These weapons used simple kinetic projectiles, nothing fancy, but they were positioned perfectly to create intersecting fields of fire. We lost 3 ships before we could withdraw." She swiped to another map. 2 weeks later, we launched another raid on a different human colony using the same tactical approach. The humans had already shared information about our tactics. This colony had the same ground-based defenses, but they had improved them. The mass drivers were now mobile, making them impossible to target effectively. They had also added what we believe are nuclear mines in orbit, camouflaged to look like debris. We lost 5 ships in that engagement. Thexlar studied the maps carefully. The tactical evolution was impressive, he had to admit. Most species took years or even decades to adapt their military doctrines. The humans were doing it in weeks. "There is something else, Commander," Lixara said, her voice dropping. "I have been analyzing the psychological profiles of the human prisoners we have taken. There is a disturbing pattern. These beings show no fear of death. They do not surrender easily, and when they do, they often use their captivity to gather intelligence on our ships and stations. 3 separate incidents have been reported where human prisoners managed to sabotage Krillian facilities before being discovered." She paused, as if considering her next words carefully. "But what concerns me most is their capacity for violence. Humans are not warriors by nature in the way we are. They are social creatures who form strong emotional bonds. Yet when threatened, they are capable of extraordinary brutality. I read a report from one of our interrogation specialists. He said that humans possess something they call controlled fury. They can suppress their emotions during combat, operating with cold efficiency, then release those emotions later in devastating bursts of aggression." Thexlar turned back to his display, pulling up an image of a human. The creature looked soft, weak even, It stood upright on two legs, had only two arms, and lacked any natural weapons like claws or fangs. Its skin appeared thin and vulnerable. Yet this was the species that had Vexnor sending desperate warnings, that had destroyed multiple Krillian warships, that was adapting to Imperial tactics at an impossible speed. "We will see for ourselves soon enough," Thexelar said finally. "The Eternal Dominion will arrive at Sector 447 in 3 days. Assemble the tactical staff. I want detailed plans for multiple engagement scenarios. If these humans are as dangerous as Vexnor suggests, we will not underestimate them." Lixara saluted and departed, leaving Thexelar alone with his thoughts. He returned his attention to the tactical display, watching as the ship's projected course drew a line through space toward the frontier station. Somewhere out there, in a small corner of the galaxy that the Empire had barely noticed, a species called humanity was preparing for war. 3 days later, the Eternal Dominion dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Sector 447. Thexelar immediately knew something was wrong. The space around Station Outpost 447 should have been filled with regular communications traffic, patrol routes, and supply ships. Instead, there was only silence. "Scan for the station," Thexelar ordered, trying to keep the tension from his voice. His sensor officer's mandibles trembled as he delivered his report. "Commander, I am detecting massive debris fields at the station's last known coordinates. Chemical signatures consistent with a battle. Multiple shipwrecks, both Krillian and unknown designs. And sir, the station itself, it is gone, not destroyed, gone." The bridge fell silent as crew members stared at their displays in disbelief. A military station could not simply disappear. It was anchored to a large asteroid, protected by shields and defensive weapons, home to over 500 personnel. "Survivors?" Thexelar asked, though he already knew the answer. "None detected, sir. No distress beacons, no escape pods, no life signs." Thexelar's hands clenched into fists. An entire station wiped from existence. Vexnor's warnings had not been exaggerations. They had been understatements. "Commander," his tactical officer called out, his voice sharp with alarm. "I am detecting multiple contacts entering sensor range. 16 vessels, unknown configuration, approaching from multiple vectors. They are surrounding us." On the main display, 16 points of light appeared, forming a perfect sphere around the Eternal Dominion. The ships were smaller than his dreadnought, sleeker, covered in odd angles that seemed designed to deflect sensor sweeps. "Hail them," Thexelar commanded. A moment later, a human face appeared on the screen. The being was female, based on the intelligence files Thexelar had reviewed. She wore a dark uniform with insignia he did not recognize. Her eyes, startlingly blue, held no fear, no hesitation, only cold calculation. "Krillian vessel," she said in perfect Krillian, "you have entered human-controlled space. You will power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will result in your destruction." Thexelar felt his mandibles click in what would have been laughter if the situation were not so serious. This human was giving him, a commander of the Krillian Imperial Fleet, orders? As if her 16 small ships could threaten the most powerful warship in this sector? "I am Commander Thexelar of the Imperial Dreadnought, Eternal Dominion. You will stand down immediately or face the consequences of attacking an Imperial vessel." The human woman's expression did not change. "You were warned, Commander. Your station commander Vexenor sent multiple messages explaining the situation in this sector. Your empire chose to ignore those warnings. You dismissed the frontier. Now you will learn why that was a mistake." The transmission ended. In the same instant, every alarm on the bridge began screaming simultaneously. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as the first impact struck its shields. Thexelar gripped his command throne, his 4 eyes fixed on the tactical display. The 16 human ships had not moved, yet something was hitting his vessel with tremendous force. "Report!" he barked. "Kinetic projectiles, sir!" His tactical officer responded, his voice strained. Railgun rounds moving at .87 light speed. They are coming from every direction. I cannot pinpoint the launch platforms. Impossible, Lixara said from her station. Railguns cannot achieve that velocity. The energy requirements would be astronomical. And yet they are doing it, the tactical officer shot back. Shields holding at 83%, but these impacts are not stopping. Thexlar's mind raced. The human ships were decoys, he realized. The real threat was invisible, hidden somehow from his sensors. This was exactly the kind of deception Vexenor had warned about. Deploy countermeasures. Full-spectrum sensor sweep. Find me those launch platforms, he commanded. His crew worked frantically, but the barrage continued. Every few seconds, another impact would strike the shields, each one precisely calculated to hit from a different angle. The humans were not trying to overwhelm the shields with raw firepower. They were testing them, probing for weaknesses, gathering data. Sir, detecting energy buildup in 4 of the human vessels, the sensor officer called out. They are charging some kind of weapon system. On the display, 4 of the 16 ships began glowing with a strange blue light. Thexlar had seen many weapons in his career, but nothing quite like this. The energy signature was unlike anything in the Krillian database. Evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Target those 4 ships. Fire when ready. The Eternal Dominion's massive weapons batteries swiveled, locking on to the glowing human vessels. Plasma beams, capable of cutting through a moon, lanced out across space. The human ships did not try to evade. They simply activated some form of energy field that absorbed the plasma completely, dispersing it harmlessly into space. Their shields are holding, sir, the weapons officer reported, disbelief evident in his voice. Our plasma had no effect. Before Thexlar could respond, the 4 human ships released their charged weapons. 4 beams of concentrated electromagnetic energy struck the Eternal Dominion simultaneously. The ship's shields flickered, then collapsed entirely. Shields down! Multiple crew members shouted at once. All defensive barriers offline! The kinetic bombardment that had been hammering the shields now struck the hull directly. Alarms shrieked as armor plating buckled under the impacts. The artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, sending unsecured crew members tumbling across the bridge. Damage report, Thexlar roared, fighting to maintain his balance. Hull breaches on decks 43 through 57. Engineering reports primary power conduits damaged. We have lost weapons capacity on the starboard side. Casualty reports coming in from multiple sections. This was not how battles were supposed to go. The Eternal Dominion was invincible. It had never been damaged in combat, let alone had its shields completely neutralized. Yet these humans, with their smaller ships and supposedly inferior technology, had accomplished in minutes what no enemy had managed in the ship's entire service history. Sir, receiving a transmission from the humans, his communications officer said quietly. The same woman from before appeared on the screen. Behind her, Thexlar could see what appeared to be a combat operations center, humans working calmly at various stations. There was no celebration, no gloating over their successful attack. They were professionals executing a plan. Commander Thexlar, your ship is crippled. Your shields are down. Your weapons are damaged, and you are surrounded. I am offering you one opportunity to surrender. Power down your remaining systems and prepare to be boarded. Your crew will be treated according to the conventions of warfare. You have 60 seconds to comply. Every instinct Thexlar possessed screamed at him to refuse. To surrender was unthinkable. The Krillian Empire did not surrender. Ever. His ancestors would curse his name across the ages. Yet as he looked at his tactical display, he saw the truth. 12 more human contacts had appeared, moving in from positions his sensors had failed to detect. His ship was damaged, outnumbered, and clearly outmatched by an enemy who understood warfare in ways the Empire had never imagined. Sub-Commander Lixara, he said quietly, your assessment. Lixara's scales had turned pale, but her voice remained steady. If we continue to fight, we will be destroyed. The humans have demonstrated capabilities we cannot counter. They neutralized our shields with a weapon we have never encountered. Their kinetic weapons are striking us from platforms we cannot locate. And they have been controlling this engagement from the beginning, Commander. We never had a chance. Thexelar closed his eyes briefly, making a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Open a channel to the humans. The woman's face reappeared on the screen. We will comply with your demands, Thexelar said, each word feeling like poison. The Eternal Dominion surrenders. The human woman nodded, her expression unchanged. A wise decision, Commander. My boarding teams will arrive shortly. I suggest you instruct your crew to offer no resistance. Any aggression will be met with lethal force. The transmission ended. Within minutes, human boarding craft attached themselves to the Eternal Dominion's hull like parasites. Thexelar watched on the internal monitors as human soldiers moved through his ship with frightening efficiency. They wore armored suits that seemed to anticipate Krillian defensive positions, using tactics that suggested intimate knowledge of Krillian ship layouts. The boarding teams moved in small units, covering each other with overlapping fields of fire. They used non-lethal weapons on crew members who surrendered immediately, but responded with brutal efficiency to any resistance. One group of Krillian soldiers attempted to mount a defense near the armory. The humans deployed some form of gas that paralyzed the defenders instantly, then secured the area within 30 seconds. The bridge doors opened, and a squad of human soldiers entered, weapons raised. They wore helmets with reflective visors, making it impossible to see their faces. The lead soldier gestured for the bridge crew to move to one side of the room. The Krillians obeyed, their training overriding their instincts to fight. A moment later, the woman from the transmissions entered. Without her helmet, she looked almost fragile. She was shorter than any adult Krillian, her frame lacking the bulk that came from evolution on a high-gravity world. Yet every human on that bridge moved with absolute confidence, as if they owned this ship, as if the Krillians were merely guests who had overstayed their welcome. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Coalition," she said, her eyes finding Thexelar immediately. "You and your senior officers will accompany me. The rest of your crew will be confined to quarters until we have secured the vessel." "Where are you taking us?" Thexelar demanded, trying to retain some dignity. "To a place where you will learn exactly why your empire should have listened to Commander Vexnor," Chen replied. "Your government made a critical error, Commander. They assumed humanity was weak because we had not spread across the galaxy. They assumed we were primitives because our technology appeared inferior. They assumed we would follow their rules of warfare because every other species they had conquered did so." She stepped closer, and Thexelar saw something in her eyes that chilled him. It was not anger or hatred. It was worse. It was the absolute certainty of someone who knew they held all the advantages. "Your empire dismissed the frontier warning. They sent you here to crush what they thought was a minor nuisance. But you did not come to conquer us, Commander. You came to be educated, and the lesson is going to be painful." Thexelar and his senior officers were escorted off the bridge and taken to a shuttle. As they left the Eternal Dominion, Thexelar caught glimpses of human soldiers methodically securing every section of his ship. They were not looting or destroying. They were claiming it, studying it, learning from it. This was not the behavior of raiders or pirates. This was the work of a military force that had planned this operation down to the smallest detail. The shuttle carried them away from the crippled dreadnought toward one of the human vessels. As they approached, Thexelar realized with shock that the ship was much larger than it had appeared on sensors. The humans had some form of stealth technology that disguised their ship's true size and capabilities. They docked inside a massive hangar bay. The interior was utilitarian, all function with little decoration. But what caught Thexlar's attention were the other ships stored there. Krillian corvettes, frigates, even a cruiser. All captured, all bearing human markings now. "You have been busy," he said quietly to Captain Chen. "We have been surviving," she corrected. "Your empire declared war on us the moment your survey ships entered our system. You designated Earth as a Class 9 death world and assumed that meant we would be easy to conquer. You thought our dangerous planet had made us weak. You were wrong." She led them through corridors filled with human personnel. Thexlar studied them carefully, trying to understand his enemy. They came in many different variations, different skin tones, different facial features, different body types. Yet they all moved with the same purpose, the same discipline. They arrived at what appeared to be an observation deck. Captain Chen gestured to the massive window that looked out into space. "I want you to see something, Commander. I want you to understand what your empire is really facing." Thexlar approached the window and felt his breath catch in his throat. In the space beyond, he saw not 16 human ships, but hundreds. They appeared out of nowhere, dropping their stealth fields in a coordinated display. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, frigates, an entire fleet that had been hiding in plain sight. "How?" he whispered. "Our sensors should have detected you." "You assumed your technology was superior," Chen said. "It is in some areas. Your plasma weapons are impressive. Your shield generators are powerful. Your faster-than-light drives are faster than ours. But technology is not just about raw power, Commander. It is about application. It is about innovation. It is about adapting to survive." She activated a holographic display, showing a map of human-controlled space. "When your survey ship first entered our system, we knew immediately what would follow. We had studied every species that made contact with the Krillian Empire. We knew your patterns. You survey, you evaluate. And if you find a species you deem worth conquering, you attack. We had maybe 5 years to prepare." The display shifted, showing the rapid construction of shipyards, weapons facilities, and training centers. "We could not match your technological sophistication. Not in that time frame, so we did what humanity has always done when facing a superior enemy. We adapted, we innovated, we used what we had in ways you would never consider." The display showed schematics of the railgun platforms that had attacked the Eternal Dominion. "Your weapons are powered by antimatter reactors, incredibly powerful, but also incredibly complex. Our railguns use simple electromagnetics, ancient technology by your standards, but we built thousands of them and hid them throughout this sector. Automated platforms that your sensors read as asteroids or debris. When you entered our space, you were already in a minefield, and you never knew it." Another schematic appeared, this one showing the weapon that had disabled the Eternal Dominion's shields. "Your shields are designed to disperse energy attacks and deflect kinetic impacts. They are very effective against conventional weapons, but they have a flaw. They operate on a specific frequency range. We developed an electromagnetic pulse weapon that targets that exact frequency. It does not try to overwhelm your shields with power. It simply disrupts the harmonic resonance that holds them together." Thexlar stared at the schematics, his mind reeling. The humans had analyzed Krillian technology and found weaknesses that Krillian engineers had never even considered. They had weaponized knowledge itself. "You want to know what happened to Commander Vexnor and his station?" Chen asked. "We took it, intact. Everyone aboard is alive and unharmed, being held at a secure facility. We will return them when this conflict ends." "We do not kill unnecessarily, Commander. That is another lesson your empire needs to learn." She turned to face Thexlar directly, her expression hard. "Your people think strength comes from conquest, from domination, from forcing others to submit to your will. But real strength comes from adaptation, from creativity, from the ability to face overwhelming odds and find a way to survive. Humanity has faced extinction more times than you can imagine. We have fought diseases, natural disasters, and each other for thousands of years. Every time we found a way to survive. Every time we became stronger. The observation deck suddenly filled with more human officers. Thexler recognized some of them from intelligence briefings. Admirals, generals, strategic planners. This was the leadership of the human military, and they were all here to witness this moment. An older human man, his hair gray and his face lined with age, stepped forward. He wore a uniform with more insignia than Captain Chen, marking him as someone of high rank. "Commander Thexlar, I am Admiral James Hawk, Supreme Commander of the Human Defense Coalition. I authorize the capture of your vessel and the defense operations that have been occurring in this sector. I want you to understand something very clearly. Humanity did not want this war. We would have been content to develop our civilization in peace. But your empire gave us no choice." The Admiral's eyes held the same cold certainty that Chen's had shown. "You came here expecting to find a primitive species ready for conquest. Instead, you found an enemy who has been preparing for you. Everything that has happened, from the loss of your patrol ships to the capture of your dreadnought, was planned. We have been studying the Krillian Empire for 5 years. We know your tactics, your strategies, your weaknesses, and we have been waiting for you to dismiss the frontier warning." The holographic display changed again, this time showing a map of Krillian space. Red markers appeared, dozens of them, scattered across Imperial territory. These markers represent human intelligence assets, observation posts, hidden facilities, monitoring stations. We have been inside your empire for 3 years, Commander. We know your fleet positions, your supply lines, your political structure. We know about the corruption in your high command, the dissent among your subject species, the resource shortages you are experiencing on the frontier. Thexlar felt his body go cold. If what the Admiral was saying was true, then the Krillian Empire was not just facing a primitive enemy. They were facing a species that had infiltrated their civilization at the highest levels. "We are going to offer you a choice, Commander," Admiral Hawk continued. "You can become a prisoner of war, held until this conflict concludes. Or you can become a messenger. We will release you and a small crew. You will take your damaged ship back to your high command, and you will tell them exactly what you have seen here." "Why?" Thexlar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you reveal your capabilities?" "Because deterrence only works if your enemy knows what they are facing," the Admiral replied. "Your empire dismissed our warnings because they thought we were weak. Now we are removing that illusion. If your high command is wise, they will withdraw from human space and never return. If they are foolish, they will send more ships, and we will capture or destroy every single one." The Admiral turned to the window, looking out at the assembled human fleet. "You asked earlier how we achieved all of this in just 5 years. The answer is simple, Commander. We were motivated. Your empire threatened our home, our families, our entire civilization. You gave us no choice but to become warriors. And there is nothing more dangerous in this galaxy than a peaceful species forced to embrace war." 2 weeks later, the damaged Eternal Dominion limped into Krillian space. Thexlar stood on the bridge, watching as his home system grew larger in the viewport. The ship that had left as a symbol of Imperial might was returning as a testament to Imperial failure. The humans had repaired only the systems necessary for basic navigation and life support. They wanted the damage to be visible, wanted everyone who saw the ship to understand what had happened. "Sir, we are being hailed by Fleet Command," his communications officer announced. "They are demanding an explanation for our condition and our unauthorized absence." "Put them through," Thexlar said wearily. The face of Grand Admiral Kreshtar appeared on the screen. The senior officer's mandibles were spread in anger, his scales flushed dark with fury. "Commander Thexlar, what is the meaning of this? Your ship looks like it has been through a major engagement. Where have you been?" Why did you not report your status? Grand Admiral, I need to speak with the High Command Council immediately. What I have to report cannot be shared over open channels. Crescitar's eyes narrowed. You will report to me first, Commander. That is the chain of command. Sir, with respect, this information needs to reach the highest levels of Imperial leadership. Lives depend on it. The entire Empire may depend on it. Something in Thexelar's voice must have convinced the Grand Admiral, because his expression shifted from anger to concern. Very well. Proceed to the capital. I will convene an emergency session of the Council. But, Commander, this had better be worth interrupting the Council's schedule. The transmission ended. Thexelar slumped into his command throne, exhaustion washing over him. He had spent the past 2 weeks composing his report, trying to find words that would make the Council understand the magnitude of the threat humanity represented. He knew most of them would not believe him at first. They would think he was exaggerating, or that he had somehow been deceived by clever primitives. But he had evidence. The humans had given him data files containing detailed analyses of Krillian military capabilities. They had provided schematics of the weapons that had disabled his ship. Most damning of all, they had included surveillance footage from inside the Krillian capital itself, showing human operatives moving freely through areas that should have been absolutely secure. 3 days later, Thexelar stood before the High Command Council in the Grand Chamber of Imperial Authority. The room was a cathedral to Krillian power, with vaulted ceilings covered in murals depicting the Empire's greatest conquests. 73 worlds, each represented by a different scene of subjugation. The council members sat on elevated platforms, arranged in a semicircle, looking down on him like judges pronouncing sentence. Grand Admiral Crescitar spoke first. Commander Thexelar, you stand before this council to explain the loss of Station Outpost 4047, the damage to your vessel, and your unauthorized actions. Speak. Thexelar took a deep breath and began. He told them everything. The warnings from Commander Vexnor, the missing patrol ships, the discovery of the destroyed station, the ambush by human forces, the capabilities they had demonstrated, the revelations about their intelligence operations inside Imperial space. As he spoke, he watched the council members' reactions. Disbelief, skepticism, dismissal. Several were already shaking their heads before he had finished. These were the leaders who had built the Empire, who had orchestrated the conquest of dozens of species. They could not, would not accept that some upstart species from a single yellow star system could pose a meaningful threat. Preposterous, Council Member Drakmor declared when Thexelar finished. You expect us to believe that a species we classified as primitive has defeated one of our most powerful warships? That they have somehow infiltrated our security? Commander, you have either been the victim of an elaborate deception, or you are attempting to cover up your own incompetence. I have evidence, Thexelar said, holding up a data crystal. The humans provided detailed documentation of everything they have accomplished. Weapon schematics, tactical analyses, surveillance footage. It is all here. Convenient, another council member said dryly. The enemy provides you with evidence of their capabilities. Does that not seem suspicious to you, Commander? Lixara, who had accompanied Thexelar to the hearing, stepped forward. Council members, I was present for all the events Commander Thexelar described. I witnessed the humans disable our shields with a weapon we have never encountered. I saw their fleet appear from stealth positions our sensors could not detect. This is not a deception. This is a genuine threat to Imperial security. A threat from a single system? Grand Admiral Crescitar scoffed. Even if these humans possess some unusual capabilities, they are confined to one small sector of space. They cannot project power across the galaxy. They cannot threaten the heart of the Empire. That is exactly what they want you to think, Thexelar said, frustration creeping into his voice. They are using our own arrogance against us. We assume they are weak because they have not expanded. We assume they are primitive because their technology appears inferior. But they are playing a different game entirely. They are not trying to conquer territory. They are trying to make conquest impossible. He activated the holographic display, showing the map of human intelligence assets inside Imperial space. These are confirmed human observation posts. There are likely many more we have not detected. They have been watching us for years, learning our weaknesses, preparing for our inevitable attack, and when we finally came, they were ready. One of the younger council members, an officer named Vixcon, leaned forward with interest. You say they disabled your shields. How? They developed a weapon that targets the harmonic frequency of our shield generators. It does not overwhelm the shields with power. It disrupts the resonance pattern that holds them together. Once the shields collapse, we are vulnerable to conventional kinetic weapons. That should not be possible, the Empire's chief science advisor interjected. Shield harmonics are a closely guarded secret. The frequency patterns are different for each ship class. There is no way an outside species could have acquired that information. Unless they have agents inside our research facilities, Lix-Ara said quietly. Unless they have compromised our security at levels we never imagined. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. If the humans truly had infiltrated Imperial institutions, then no information was safe. No plans were secure. The entire foundation of Imperial power might be compromised. I propose we test this, Council Member Vixcon said. Commander Thexalar, you said the humans provided surveillance footage from inside our capital. Let us see it. Thexalar inserted the data crystal into the chamber's main display system. A moment later, footage began playing. It showed the interior of the Imperial Strategic Planning Center, one of the most secure facilities in Krillian space. The camera perspective moved through corridors, past security checkpoints, into rooms where classified information was displayed openly on screens and maps. Then the footage showed something that made several council members gasp. A Krillian officer, one they all recognized, accepting a data chip from a figure in shadows. The Krillian was Colonel Mexnar, head of strategic intelligence, one of the most trusted officers in the entire military. When was this recorded? Grand Admiral Kreshatar demanded, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. 3 months ago, Thexalar replied. The humans provided timestamps and metadata. They have been observing our strategic planning center for at least a year. The footage continued, showing more locations, military bases, research laboratories, even the council chamber where they now stood. In every location, human operatives or their surveillance equipment had captured sensitive information. This is an act of war, Drakmor declared. We must respond with overwhelming force. Assemble the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd fleets. We will wipe this human infection from the galaxy. That is exactly what they expect you to do, Thexalar said urgently. They have prepared for a massive Imperial response. Every tactic we know, every strategy in our doctrine, they have already analyzed and developed countermeasures for. If we send our fleets to human space, we will be walking into the same trap that caught the Eternal Dominion. Then what do you propose, Commander? Vixcan asked. That we simply allow these humans to continue their operations unmolested? That we accept their intelligence gathering and their attacks on our forces? Thexalar had spent days thinking about this exact question. The answer he had reached was not one the Council would want to hear, but it was the truth. We negotiate, he said simply. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Several Council members began shouting at once. Negotiate? The Krillian Empire did not negotiate with lesser species. The Empire conquered or it withdrew. There was no middle ground. Grand Admiral Kreshatar raised a hand for silence. Explain yourself, Commander. Why would we negotiate from a position of weakness? Because we are not negotiating from weakness, sir. We are negotiating from pragmatism. The humans have demonstrated that they can defend their space. They have also demonstrated that they can strike at us anywhere in the Empire. But they have not done so. They captured your station intact. They released me and my crew to deliver their message. They are showing restraint." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "The humans do not want to conquer us. They want to be left alone. If we withdraw from their sector, establish a neutral zone, and cease all hostile actions, they have indicated they would be willing to do the same. We would lose nothing we did not already lose when they destroyed our station and captured our ships." "This is cowardice," Drakmor spat. "The Empire does not retreat. The Empire also does not waste resources on unwinnable conflicts," Vixcon countered. "If these humans are as capable as Commander Thexelar suggests, then attempting to conquer them would cost us ships, personnel, and resources we need for other priorities. The Xerxian Federation has been growing more aggressive on our northern border. The Velcrin Collective is challenging our mining rights in the Omega sector. We have real threats to deal with. Why would we waste our strength on a species that wants nothing from us except to be left alone?" The debate continued for hours. Thexelar and Lixara answered countless questions, showed every piece of evidence the humans had provided, and argued their case with increasing desperation. Slowly, reluctantly, some of the council members began to see reason. "Very well," Grand Admiral Kreshitar finally said, his voice heavy with reluctance. "We will attempt to establish communication with these humans. We will explore the possibility of a negotiated settlement. But I want contingency plans prepared. If negotiation fails, we will be ready to respond with force." It was not the complete agreement Thexelar had hoped for, but it was better than an immediate military response. The council adjourned, and Thexelar found himself standing in the empty chamber, exhausted but cautiously hopeful. Vixcon approached him, the young council member's expression thoughtful. "You believe these humans are honorable, that they will keep any agreement we reach?" "I do not know if honorable is the right word," Thexelar admitted. "But they are pragmatic. They fight to protect their home, not to build an empire. That makes them different from every other species we have encountered. It also makes them potentially dangerous in ways we have not yet imagined." 3 weeks later, a delegation of Krillian diplomats met with human representatives in a neutral location, a space station at the edge of the disputed sector. Thexelar was not part of the official delegation, but Admiral Hawk had specifically requested his presence as an observer. The negotiations were tense. The humans made their position clear from the start. They wanted all Krillian forces withdrawn from their sector. They wanted a demilitarized zone established, 5 light-years deep on the Imperial side of the border, and they wanted diplomatic recognition as a sovereign power, not as a subject species or potential conquest. The Krillian diplomats, unaccustomed to negotiating with species they considered inferior, struggled with the demands. But the evidence Thexelar had provided, combined with the humans' demonstrated capabilities, gave them little room to argue. On the 3rd day of negotiations, Captain Chen approached Thexelar during a recess. "You did well, Commander. Your report convinced your leadership to pursue dialogue instead of war. That took courage." "I reported the truth," Thexelar said simply. "Your people gave me no choice but to see that truth." "We gave you a choice," Chen corrected. "You could have returned and claimed we tricked you somehow. You could have recommended a military response. You could have let your pride override your judgment. But you did not. You put the welfare of your people ahead of your personal reputation. That is the mark of a true leader." She handed him a data pad. "This is a personal message from Admiral Hawk. He wanted you to know that we do not consider you or your crew to be enemies. You are following orders, doing your duty. We respect that. We also respect that you were willing to learn from your experience and try to prevent further bloodshed." Thexelar read the message, surprised by the humans' generosity. After everything that had happened, After he had led an attack into their space, they were treating him with respect rather than contempt. "Why are you doing this?" he asked. "You have every right to hate us. We came to conquer your world, to enslave your people. Yet you speak of respect and dialogue." Chen was quiet for a moment before answering. "Because hatred is easy, Commander. Vengeance is easy. But building something better, creating a future where our species can coexist peacefully, that is hard. Humanity has spent too much of our history hating each other, fighting wars that accomplish nothing but death and suffering. We finally learned that there is another way. We are trying to teach that lesson to the galaxy now." The negotiations concluded 2 days later with a historic agreement. The Krillian Empire officially recognized human sovereignty over their sector. A demilitarized zone was established. Trade and cultural exchange programs were proposed, though it would be years before either side trusted the other enough to implement them fully. Thexalar stood with Captain Chen and Admiral Hawk at an observation window, watching as Krillian and human ships departed the neutral station in opposite directions. "Do you think this will last?" Thexalar asked. "There are many in my government who see this agreement as a temporary setback, not a permanent peace." "Probably not," Hawk admitted. "There will always be those who think conquest is easier than coexistence. But we have bought time. Time for both our peoples to learn about each other. Time for trade and communication to build connections that transcend politics. Time for a generation to grow up knowing that the other species is not an enemy, but a neighbor." He turned to face Thexalar directly. "Your empire dismissed the frontier warning because you thought it did not matter. You learned otherwise. Other species will make the same mistake. They will see humanity's small territory and limited expansion and assume we are weak. They will attack, and we will teach them the same lesson we taught you. Eventually, perhaps the galaxy will learn that strength is not measured only in conquered worlds." Months later, Thexalar found himself reassigned to a new position. He was no longer a ship commander. Instead, he had been appointed as the Empire's first ambassador to humanity. It was a role that many saw as a demotion, a polite exile for an officer who had failed in his mission. But Thexalar understood the truth. He was being given an opportunity to help build something new. A relationship between two species that had started with violence but might end in understanding. He stood in his new office on the diplomatic station that had been established at the human border. Through the window, he could see both Krillian and human ships moving in carefully coordinated patterns. The ships were still armed, still ready for war. But they were also following agreed-upon protocols, communicating through established channels, solving problems through dialogue rather than violence. It was not peace, not yet. But it was not war either. It was something in between, something fragile and uncertain, but filled with potential. A message arrived on his console. It was from Commander Vexnor, who had been released by the humans, along with all the other prisoners from Station Outpost 447. Vexnor had been vindicated. His warnings had been proven correct, but rather than celebrating, his message was somber. "Commander Thexalar, I have been reading your reports from the diplomatic negotiations. I am glad that you were able to convince the Council to pursue a peaceful resolution, but I worry about the future. There are many in the Empire who see this agreement as a humiliation. They whisper that we should have sent more ships, that we should have overwhelmed the humans with superior numbers. They do not understand that the humans were prepared for exactly that response." The message continued. "I have learned something during my captivity. The humans have a saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. They would rather spend resources preparing for war than fighting one. They would rather negotiate than conquer. This mindset is alien to our culture. We have spent centuries believing that might makes right, that the strong have the natural right to rule the weak. The humans have shown us that there is another way. But I do not know if our people are capable of truly understanding that lesson. Thexelar read the message 3 times, each time feeling the weight of Vexnor's words. The former station commander was right. The Empire had agreed to peace, not because they had learned the value of cooperation, but because they had calculated that war with humanity would be too costly. It was a pragmatic decision, not a philosophical one. But pragmatism could be a starting point. Over time, economic ties and cultural exchange might transform pragmatic coexistence into genuine peace, or the hawks in the Empire might gain power and demand another attempt at conquest. The future was uncertain. A chime at his door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," he called. Captain Chen stepped in, now wearing the uniform of a diplomatic liaison rather than a military officer. "Ambassador Thexelar, I wanted to welcome you officially to your new position. I will be your primary human contact for diplomatic matters." "Thank you, Captain. Or should I say Ambassador Chen now?" She smiled. "Sarah is fine when we are speaking privately. Formality has its place, but I have found that genuine relationships are built on mutual respect and honesty, not titles and protocol." They stood together at the window, looking out at the ships and the stars beyond. "Do you believe this will work?" Thexelar asked, echoing the question he had posed to Admiral Hawk months ago. "Can our species truly coexist?" "I believe we have to try," Sarah replied. "The alternative is war, and war between our peoples would be devastating for both sides. We would probably win eventually. Our intelligence networks, our adaptability, our strategic patience give us advantages you cannot easily counter. But victory would come at a terrible cost. Millions would die, resources would be wasted, and in the end, what would we have gained? More empty space? The ashes of your civilization?" She shook her head. "Humanity has fought enough wars, Thexelar. We know what war costs. We know that every conflict, even when won, leaves scars that take generations to heal. So yes, I believe this can work, because the alternative is too terrible to contemplate." Thexelar nodded slowly. "My people will need time to adjust. We have built our entire culture around the concept of military dominance, to accept that we cannot conquer everyone we encounter, that some species must be treated as equals rather than subjects. This is a revolutionary idea for us." "Then perhaps you need a revolution," Sarah said gently. "Not a violent one, but a revolution of thought, a transformation of perspective. You are uniquely positioned to help guide that transformation, Thexelar. You have seen what humanity is capable of. You have experienced our approach to warfare firsthand. You can help your people understand that strength takes many forms." As the years passed, Thexelar did exactly that. He became a bridge between two civilizations that had nearly destroyed each other. He helped establish cultural exchange programs that allowed young Krillians to study human history and philosophy. He facilitated trade agreements that made both species economically dependent on peaceful relations. He mediated disputes that might have escalated into violence. It was slow, difficult work. There were setbacks. Hardliners on both sides attempted to sabotage the peace. There were incidents where human and Krillian ships nearly came to blows over misunderstandings or provocations. But each time, Thexelar and Sarah and others like them worked to de-escalate, to find solutions, to preserve the fragile peace. And gradually, something remarkable happened. The generation that grew up after the border war knew each other not as enemies, but as trading partners, cultural curiosities, and eventually as friends. Young Krillians studied human literature and philosophy. Young humans learned Krillian engineering and mathematics. Scientists from both species collaborated on research projects. Artists created works that blended both cultures. The Empire never fully abandoned its militaristic traditions, but it learned to channel those traditions in new directions. Instead of conquering new species, The military focused on defending against external threats and maintaining order in already controlled space. Some veterans, like Thexelar himself, moved into diplomatic roles where their experience gave them credibility. 20 years after the border war, Thexelar stood in the same observation room where he had first met with Admiral Hawk and Captain Chen. But now the view was different. The space station had expanded dramatically, becoming a thriving hub of commerce and cultural exchange. Hundreds of ships, both human and Krillian, moved through the system daily. Admiral Hawk, now retired and serving as a civilian advisor, joined him at the window. The old warrior had aged gracefully, his hair now completely white, his face lined with the marks of a life well lived. "Do you ever regret it?" Hawk asked. "Choosing peace over war? I know it cost you your military career. You were on track to become a Grand Admiral." Thexelar considered the question carefully. He thought about the eternal dominion, about the crew members who had died in that first engagement, about the years he had spent rebuilding his reputation and fighting for a peace that many of his people had not wanted. "No," he said finally, "I do not regret it. I regret the lives lost. I regret that we did not listen to Vexnor's warnings sooner. But I do not regret choosing this path, because what we have built here is worth more than any military victory. We have proven that different species can find common ground. That strength can be measured in ways other than conquest. That dismissing warnings from the frontier can teach painful lessons, but those lessons can lead to something better." Hawk nodded, a slight smile on his weathered face. "You know, when we first captured you, I was not sure you would be capable of learning that lesson. The Krillian Empire was so confident in its superiority. But you surprised me, Thexelar. You chose wisdom over pride. That is rare in any species." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the ships move through space. Somewhere out there, the galaxy continued its eternal dance. New species were emerging, old conflicts were flaring, and the endless cycle of war and peace played out across countless worlds. But here, in this small corner of space, two species had found a different way. They had dismissed the frontier warning, had paid the price for that dismissal, and had emerged from the experience transformed. The lesson had been painful, but it had been learned, and perhaps, Thexelar thought, that was enough. Not every species needed to conquer the galaxy. Not every civilization needed to dominate others to prove its worth. Sometimes, the greatest victory was simply learning to coexist, to respect, and to grow together rather than apart. The frontier had taught the Empire a lesson it would never forget. And in learning that lesson, both humanity and the Krillian Empire had become something better than they had been before.